As a therapist, it's important for me to have good connection in my family. I'm talking to people every day, all day long, and I really want to feel like I'm doing what I can do with my own family so I don't feel hypocritical in terms of trying to help other people with their families. So as I think about that, I think about a few things that have happened in my family in the last, I guess about 15 years. I have 3 kids and a husband. I've been married about 25 years. And when my 17-year-old, my second born, was just maybe 3 or 4 years old, I remember a time where we were just all having family time. When they're little like that, they come jump in the bed with their parents on a Saturday morning and just lay around and snuggle and have fun together. And I remember my little one said something like, "I just love us." And I just thought that was the cutest thing ever, in terms of him coming to the table and saying, there's something about us being together that feels like home, that feels like family, that feels like I belong, and I love that feeling. And so that was a win. And I remember another time that wasn't so much of a win when my oldest, maybe at around 9 or 10 years old, said something like, we were in conflict. We were having a family conflict, and he said, maybe we just all need to go find other families to belong to. Maybe this isn't working out so well. And in that moment, it feels like, the connection is lost, and it doesn't feel so good. It doesn't feel like we have what we really need as a family to make our children feel like this really matters. So we know that connection can be found and it can be lost. And as therapists, we want to be able to find the connection and nurture that with our children as much as possible. My name is Monica Maurer. I'm a licensed therapist, and I'm the director of the Center for Transformation Institute. At the CFT Institute, we exist to partner with therapists in personal and professional growth, and we use the life model to do that. The life model is a neurotheology technique, a model that we have come across. Those of us at the CFT Institute have come across this model in the last maybe almost a decade, and we've applied it to our lives personally. It's been transformational, and now we're partnering with lifemodelworks, the founding company, LifeModel, to offer curriculum for therapists to learn the model and to grow in the model. We are working on a continuing education curriculum that will be ready. We're about ready to launch our first training in the next few months, so be on the lookout for that. But right now we're just here present on social media. We have a podcast, The Place Therapists Grow. And then we also have a YouTube channel and a website, cftinstitute.com. So if you've not been there, there's an assessment on there. Take that assessment and you'll get on our email newsletter, and you'll be able to stay in the loop in terms of what we have going on here at the Institute and how we're going to bring the life model to therapists. So this episode is focused on family connection, on relational connection in our families. And the first thing I want to discuss about that is the idea that there are high joy communities and low joy communities. And we want our families to be high joy communities. We want our families to feel safe to the people in them, to our children and to our spouses, to our extended family. We want people to feel like they have a place to belong. We don't want to disenfranchise or cause people to feel isolated or misunderstood or not known. And so I think as therapists we have a high value for that. A low joy community is one where a predatory brain is the most dominant brain, and a high joy community is one where a gentle protector brain is the most dominant brain. And that can be very subtle, and I think there's a lot of us as parents think we're gentle protectors, but it's not always the case. I think we get frustrated, and sometimes our dominance tends to be more predatory. And a main definition of a predator is one who exploits weakness, one who sees a weakness in someone and instead of nurturing that person into their true identity, exploits it. Versus a gentle protector is someone who models protecting the weak and being tender to the weakness of others, being tender to our own personal weaknesses, and kind of cultivating a sense of a safe place for people to be vulnerable and show weaknesses, to have faults and weaknesses, and that people aren't going to be kind of crucified for their weaknesses or exploited or whatever. It's not that we're not talking about hard things or confronting weaknesses, but that when these weaknesses and difficulties happen, when somebody's bad judgment calls or ways of coping with life come forward and those unhealthy things appear, that we're not judging and blaming and shaming in a toxic way, but that we're gently correcting and bringing our children or our spousal relationship back into healthy connection. So we want to be able to create high joy, not low joy environments for our families. As therapists who are parents, we want to be able to cultivate a safe place for our children to belong. And one sign that they feel that sense of belonging is that they will open up to us, that they will dialogue with us about what's going on, that they find us to be a safe haven, a home base, a place where they can land and let themselves be seen and known. And if that's not happening, we know we might not be cultivating that at the level that we want to. And it's important that we discover what that is that's going on that's preventing that. Intentionality is a huge piece of this. I know that in my own family, my own parenting, it's a lot about spending time, but I'm not sure it's just time. It seems to be intentional time that's thought out, time that says, hey, what can I do to get into your world, to understand you, to discover the unique characteristics of your heart as my child, and help you discover who you are and be happy and content with who you are in the world. And so I think that there's some intentionality around that. We don't choose our children, right? They're born to us. Sometimes we adopt our children, but even then, it's not like we know how they're going to grow and develop and the person they're going to become. So we end up having a child that feels, I think, very providential. Like, I feel God gave you to me as your parent, and I love you just because you exist, just because you're mine. And I accept you for who you are and who your developing personality is. Well, as a parent, we hopefully have some more maturity than our kids. And kids oftentimes display immaturity. I mean, they're immature. They're kids. They're not supposed to be as mature as a parent. And immaturity can be very annoying. So as parents, it's important for us to model tenderness to weakness, that even though we are getting, our patience is getting tested and tried, we're using that feeling of annoyance and difficulty to launch us into an opportunity for growth in our own maturity, that we're not just tolerating our children or those around us who are less mature, but that we are actually learning to enjoy and love and have grace for those who are less mature. That we aren't valuing people based on their maturity, we're valuing them based on the fact that they exist. And so I think sometimes as parents we can say, I don't like my child, I don't like being around them, and I don't even want to admit that to myself or anyone else. But I feel bad for it. And I think at those moments it's a challenge for us to go deep within ourselves and say, why do I value my child? Why do I value who they are? And challenge ourselves before God to search ourselves and ask for God to give us love in our heart for our child, and go into that place of intentionality with them because it's not always going to just come natural to have love and patience. Those are gifts of the Spirit. And I believe the life model kind of takes us into this practice of Emmanuel presence, where we bring our own weaknesses before the Lord and we ask God to help us understand ourselves and our true identity, and help couple with us in terms of growing in our character integrity and ability to connect with His Spirit to give us what we don't have naturally. Another really important thing, I think, that helps with family connection is just awareness of what Life Model calls beeps, or addiction type activities that could really sidetrack your ability to stay connected in relationship. So BEEPS stand for, it's an acronym for behaviors, experiences, events, people, and substances. And when those things are present in the family life, it really distracts from true joyful connection. So beeps are pseudo joys, and oftentimes in our families we're in an entertainment culture, and we've got social media, we've got our phones, our iPads, our electronics, our video games, movies, and there's just a constant sense of maybe even food, sugar, caffeine, shopping. There's all of these distractions, and those things aren't all bad necessarily. We don't want to vilify all of them. But what happens is they distract us from true joyful activity. And so when we isolate ourselves and our families and do these things, rather than spend the time together, we aren't able to fully experience true joy with one another. And pseudo joys never satisfy, they never satiate the soul. So we're left having pseudo joy experiences, and we're growing. If pseudo joys don't satisfy, then you need more and more of them to get the same dopamine release. And then if you're not having a true joyful interaction with your family, then you're not growing the bond with one another. So there are some ideas that I'll throw out there now before I end this episode in terms of true joyful connection. And so here are a few things you can do. One is that you want to get eye contact as much as possible. And no staring contest, well, just for fun, that might be that might be something funny, but just before you leave the room or leave for the day, or when you come back, get a little eye contact with your kids when you're talking with them. Try to connect with their eyes so that they feel seen and that you're connecting to the window of their soul. Physical touch as much as appropriate. If they don't want hugs, don't force it, but pats on the back, on the shoulder, a ruffle of the hair, a little wrestling. I know dads and sons oftentimes do that, but there can be some gentle wrestling and joking around that can be really powerful. And so always physical touch is important for joyful connection. Telling stories. A sign of a healthy family is a family that tells stories, not stories that are too long, but short stories, play-by-plays of the day, or fun things that have happened, or even stressful things that have happened, because joy doesn't mean I'm happy. Joy means it's good to be together. And so we can share our ups and downs. I know I worked with a family once that did the rose and the thorns, and they would tell the good and the bad of their day. So those are a few things that we can do to share joy with our family members and really be intentional with our children. There's a lot more where that came from. Chris Kersey has written Transforming Fellowship and heads up the Thriving Today. I think it's thrivingtoday.org. And there's so much more about brain relational skills and things that we can do. Just showing appreciation is another thing. Just a side note. Appreciation for each other. I call it identity appreciation, saying I appreciate you because you are this, and I experience you as this, when we're speaking out true identity. And so those are a few things you can do to share appreciation, or to share joy and build joyful connection, fill up the joy tanks in your family home. I look forward to the continued conversation, and I will see you on the next episode.